So, Joe, can you ever remember a time where you weren't sexually frustrated by Zack Snyder? Wait, did I say sexually?
You did say sexually because like I can think of a recent time where I'm just frustrated with him, and the sexual part is completely left out, and it really isn't a mystery to me.
Oh, all right. So I didn't.
Something just slipped that Mark was not aware of. Oh, I did not know this about myself today.
All right. Well, there you go, man. You think you got something that's really going to sound great, and then it comes out like that. Oh my god.
Oh man. Welcome back, pop culture nerds. We're discovering all sorts of things about ourselves tonight.
Well, believe it or not, there was a time and a place where Joe and I were not hearing that Zack Snyder was involved with a movie and immediately just thought,
yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I'm not going to get through this bullshit for another 2 hours. I don't know.
No, this is definitely a time where it's the exact opposite of that, where Zack Snyder actually isn't quite as big yet. This is one of his earlier big movies that we're looking at tonight with Dawn of the Dead. Sort of not a soft reboot, but a spiritually soft reboot of the old one, in that it is in name and in essence the same movie, minus the Barbras and everything else going on from the original. But yeah, so this is like a Zack Snyder on the rise, right? Like this movie hits, I think it does pretty darn well off the bat as far as horror movies go and movies go. And then, like, you know, then he gets 300, and we're like, hey, this Zack Snyder guy knows what he's doing. And then, oh my gosh, Watchmen, this guy's great. And then we get Sucker Punch, like, what the fuck is this guy doing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Dawn of the Dead was really one of those movies that kind of punched me in the mouth, and I'll explain why. Back at this point in time, I actually was going to a Bible study group, believe it or not, Joe, which I don't think I was actually truly going to study. I think I was going so that I could develop knowledge to make fun of the topic. But either way, I was going.
Okay. I assumed that maybe you were pursuing a woman, and this was the way that you were going. Yeah.
No, just dudes. All dudes in this group.
All dudes. Okay.
Yeah, just all dudes. But it was one of those things where it's like, you went to Bible study sarcastically? And I was like, yes, I did. But we had
you got to fly, Mark.
Yeah, exactly, man. Well, there's this time where everybody was like, all right, there's like four of us, and we're like, hey, we want to do something outside of the Bible study. And so me going like, oh, this is interesting. All right. And one of the guys suggests, hey, let's go see a movie. There's this new movie out called Dawn of the Dead. Let's go check it out. And here I am going, Dawn of the Dead. Bible study group. What are we doing here? I'm not quite sure I understand. Because this was an era for me, Joe, where I would watch zombie movies, but it would be like that Saturday weekend sci-fi zombie movie. Like we're like the Yuva Bowl, absolute shittiest zombie movies that a human being can watch. That's the stuff I was consuming.
Well, I mean, that's what zombie movies kind of were, though, right? Like they were inherently all campy. Like I'm trying to think of a movie before this that was a legitimately scary zombie movie. And like I suppose like maybe the first Dawn of the Dead for its time like had some people like afraid of it, but like when you see that original series continue, like it just really leans into camp. Eventually the zombies are like gaining intelligence and like talking normally, and I think running for Congress. Like there's all sorts of weird things going on with it. So it's just a genre within a genre that has lost even more credibility than the full genre over time, if that makes sense to anyone. So it's like they're campy. They're like these slow moving things where everyone's just confused. Like, well, hey, if they move so slow and they're really dumb, how do they actually take over the world? And this movie is like, hold the fucking phone.
Yeah,
we're gonna show you.
If you have call waiting, you better use it because you're going to need it before you go see this movie back in 2004 when that actually mattered. But what's funny, though, Zack Snyder, director, yes, this is long before he was pissing off every DC fan humanly possible. But this was also when James Gunn was relatively unknown himself, and he actually wrote this movie, which back then, if you said, hey, James Gunn wrote this back in 2004 when I was seeing it, I would go, that's awesome. Who is James Gunn?
Yep. Who is this man?
Yeah, fantastic. Need a little more help with this.
Yep.
So, but speaking of 2004, I don't really think we were expecting the response for this, Joe. And I'll kind of run through this as we have been with some of these films this year. This was actually a 76% by the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, 77% from the audience. I mean, that to me means, okay, we got balance, you know?
Yeah.
It's like Thanos' knife, perfectly balanced as all things should be.
So it sounds like then it should actually be a pretty okay movie then, by all things considered. When you've got both critics and audience put in that like mid to high 70s range. So when I look at it though, like I look fondly upon this movie for a few reasons. Number one, it introduced me to Richard Cheese.
Oh yeah,
and that was enough. That was. I mean, if we just ended the movie on the montage with Richard Cheese's cover of "Down with the Sickness," which if you have not heard before or are unaware of Richard Cheese, he's a lounge singer who covers any myriad of music, and it is phenomenal. Like it is just like it transcends the original in bizarre ways. But anyway, for that alone, and honestly, one of like the most solid, scary zombie openings in a movie, quite frankly, to this day. Like, it hooks you with those two things and does enough to kind of keep you going in between and after, where I think this is an enjoyable movie.
And to be honest with you, Joe, before we get to our breakdown, let's jump in and hear what some other people were saying about this movie, just like we have been doing all year on this program. So we're going to start with the negative commentary on this film. I'm actually going to pull two of them this time. So one person says, the new version has its share of disturbing moments, but writer James Gunn and director Zack Snyder has stripped away the social satire of the original and put little in its place. Got to say, if you watched the original Dawn of the Dead, yes, there's a lot of like anti-commercialism and this satirical feel of the original, which, Joe, to your point, I think is where some of that campiness does come through a little bit, shines through, I should say, because it wasn't actually, it was still entertaining, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that, okay, yes, there is, I think this is like a little bit of a half-truth in this quote-unquote negative rating. On the other side of the negativity, someone said, extremely gory horror movie, not for kids. which I gotta say, how are you a critic?
It's rated R. That is telling you that it's not for kids. Like, this is right up there with like me. I remember seeing reviews for Deadpool, and there was this very angry mom being like, I had no idea a superhero movie was gonna be this obscene and graphic, and oh my gosh, the swearing. And it's like, it's fucking rated R. Do you not read anything? Or do you just, like, why have we stopped doing this? Like,
is there methane leak under your house?
Don't take this
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you eat paint chips as a kid? Like, what's going on here? Oh, actually, Mark, as a surprise curveball, I have also brought a review to the table. And normally I don't do this. This is part of Mark's shtick in the podcast. But I have found a review too. And it is simply, zombies, fuck off, I'm never watching this movie. Chelsea. Yes. Right. So, yes. Former host and reoccurring like guest host Chelsea absolutely hates zombie movies. Like, it is like night terror inducing level of horror to her. She can't even watch Shaun of the Dead. It is it is that much of it. Like, I mean, like I will say that like clowns are like a 10 for me, but I can watch the old It and be like, fuck that guy especially, and like go to bed just fine. Chelsea will watch Shaun of the Dead and like not sleep for a week. Like, she can't do it. Wow. So did not invite her back for this episode for her health.
Well, I figured anything she said would be neutral to negative at minimum.
Hmm.
One of the positive reviews is the screenplay by James Gunn has its own survivalist drive, and first-time feature director Zack Snyder delivers something what Romero didn't. He turns it into a high-octane zombie action film.
Yeah.
So,
High octane is a very accurate way to describe the zombies in the movie.
oh dear God, yes. High
Hmm.
octane is the best way, I think, to actually describe this film. Because, Joe, I know we just said high octane, but if we pull back for just a moment, this is a horror film that's
Hmm.
set in the middle of one of the cities that never sleeps, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
I was gonna say instead of high octane, we probably should have said whole or vitamin D. That's what this what the devil is, because it is not 2% milk, ladies and gentlemen. This is the whole fucking milk you get when you take this. And
Oh,
I do
yeah.
have to say, watching it in retrospect, I do shed a tear when they say that Miller Park is no longer a safe place. It's like, oh,
Yes, yes.
oh, Miller Park. Too soon. It'll always be too soon that we don't call it Miller Park anymore. American
Eh,
Family Field. I appreciate you giving them money so they can keep on playing, but god damn, does it not sound the same?
yes, we
Mm-mm.
have to say that Requiescat in Pace to Miller Park. It's no longer with us, unfortunately. But you know what? I am actually happy for once, Joe, that Wisconsin, or
Mm-hmm.
one of the larger cities in Wisconsin, is the setting of such a film because it's
Yeah.
really it's kind of awkward, isn't it, for a film
Mm-hmm.
to be set in the Midwest that's like not Chicago,
Yeah,
right?
it's yeah, not only awkward that it's not Chicago, but that's in Wisconsin, and that it's not just one stereotype after the next. Is what I
Yeah,
feel
well,
like. Mm-hmm.
yeah. I was gonna say, shouldn't all of the zombies be like diabetic and
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming inebriated in some way, because
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
these zombies should not be able to run, Joe. That's the point I'm
not at
trying to
all.
make.
Not one bit. They should, like, I mean, they can be moving at maximum speed, but by all means, like, you just take your time. You can get away from them. And like it's also in that same vein, it's not every protagonist is just some, good old boy in the backwoods with a gun. Because if you watch things like The Beast of Bray Road, that is the
Mm.
whole cast. Which I'm not going to recommend that B movie to anyone, but that's the vibe that Wisconsin puts off. You're either large, not quite in charge, or you live in the deepest part of the woods. And that's
Yeah,
what you get.
yeah.
So this movie doesn't do that with really any of the characters. We have one overweight woman. She does move pretty fast as a zombie. So there is that. But everything else, like, they're just people, which is refreshing.
Which,
Hmm.
hey, one of those people is Sarah Polly, who,
Yep. Hmm.
as an actress, I gotta say, Sarah Polly was in a lot of stuff in the early 2000s, and I'm pretty sure that she suffered a brain injury of some kind because
Hmm.
she kind of semi-retired from acting
Yeah. Hmm.
after this point in time. So, like, if you've seen Sarah Polly before and you watch this film and you're like, oh shit, whatever happened to her?
Hmm.
Like, that's one of those things that I actually looked up a few years ago. Is like I was watching Dawn of the Dead, having an
Hmm.
obnoxiously large sandwich, by the way, details you don't need. But suddenly I was like, where the hell did Sarah Polly go? And I gotta say, her is like the main character of this movie is actually really cool because she's a nurse and she's
Hmm.
like right in the thick of where a lot of zombie movies tend to start. But I've labeled this as a calm pot of boiling water. Like in the beginning of this movie, we're introduced to the parts of zombie films that don't always get put at the forefront, which is we've got real life going on first,
Hmm.
and we're going to start showing you a little bit of
The
a little bit of that
fall.
boil,
Like, yeah.
yeah, come up
Hmm.
at a time. And so, what did you think about the choice to focus on her character as like the nurse character,
Hmm.
and then kind of show what life was like for her?
Well, one thing I think just a great choice in an actress is because like Sarah Polly just does a great job in this movie. Like you honestly see her as a nurse. Like you think, like, yeah, they just grabbed a nurse off the street and they put her in this role. And I think also, like, I think she wins a statue at some point in time. I want to say, I think, because I'm pretty sure her IMDb pictures her with an Oscar. She didn't get it for this movie. Probably got it for a different one, just because zombie movies really don't, pick up in that Oscar season. But I do appreciate that we do see life as we know it before the zombies really take over, and like that you get to really connect with her character right away in the movie when she is like trying to get out of work, and not like trying to get out of work and like faking calling in sick, like, hey, sorry, I was in a horrible plane crash, I'll be in on Monday. Not that kind of get out of work, but like she started at 6 a.m. It is clearly in the evening, and she's still at work, and she's dropping hints to like a doctor, like, I want to go home in the nicest way, and he just completely just doesn't get it or doesn't care. So like we can all like, especially like I feel like in the Midwest with how much we do value work, but also want to be able to go home at a decent time after the work, like you pick up with that right away. And then like you get to see her at her home with her husband. There's like a neighbor kid before that, and you've got this nice like subdivision that she lives in, and it seems like for the most part it is the average life that most of us here in the Midwest are really hoping to achieve. And then in the middle of the night it all just comes crumbling down. But before that, they do nice little hints to let you know shit's happening. Like you've got like a victim, like a guy who's in the, I think, ER, who gets put into intensive care at some point, and she's like, he just got bit by some guy. Like, why is he up there for that? And you don't really know what's going on. But of course, like, it's a zombie movie, so bites really bad. So you've got that. Like ambulances are getting like. I think 2 get called off like back to back in this part, so things are starting to go down.
That's right, and that's why I love to use that boiling water analogy for this, because a lot of zombie movies will either pick up where like shit's already going down, and there's a reason why I really enjoy seeing what life is like beforehand, because then it makes what ends up happening later just that much more stark, but it really anchors you quite a bit, right? Like it's funny that we're academically talking about a zombie movie right now, but the truth is there's levels of zombie movie here that some people are going, yep, that is absolutely top shelf shit, and then there's the other stuff that we're literally laughing at the entire time and having a party around it.
Oh, absolutely. And which brings us to part of that scene that I think is one of the creepiest scenes out of any movie. For a zombie movie, is when like the little neighbor girl is suddenly in their house and she's like missing a chunk of her face, and like does like everything's like, oh no, the poor girl, she's been hurt, called 911, and then like her husband gets bit right in the neck by her, and like they toss her out into the hallway, and you think, oh god, there's this little girl, you threw her away, she should be fine. You see her just like hop back up and like bolt down the hallway. It's like, oh fuck, the shit's going, like they got real fast. Faster than we were expecting. Holy shit. So, like, I don't know about you, but, like, this is, like, one part of the movie, and, like, one criticism I would say is, like, I don't think I ever get as scared in this movie again as I did in that moment, as a bit of a critique. But, hey, what do you think about this movie, like, really just slapping you in the face and getting you started?
Well, for one, let me take you back to the movie theater when I went there, okay? Because I had watched plenty of zombie movies. I was one of those people that I was always telling my friends about zombie movies because they don't watch them. I was. When this began, this scene where she's the little girl's in the hallway, I was slinking in my chair as a teenager. Like, I was slinking down and, like, covering up my eyes a little bit, going like, holy fuck. Zombies don't move like this. Zombies do not behave like this. They don't lure you into that false sense of security and then rip out half of your neck. They like that's not what they were doing. And yes, the speed at which she moved, holy shit. like I'll put it this way. When the wife and I got together many years ago, there was a conversation around what kind of zombie movie is this zombie movie?
Mm-hmm.
Are they slow moving or can they break out into a full sprint?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This movie is the reason why my wife and I have to talk to each other about what kind of movies or what kind of zombies are in this property that we're watching right now. So yeah, now one important question that I have for you, Joe.
Yes.
Who left the fucking door open?
Yeah. How'd this kid get in there? I mean, because on top of this, yes, it's a subdivision, but it's still Milwaukee. They lock their houses. Like, they lock their doors. Like, we do this here. This isn't like, oh, this is up north in Minnesota, and it's just so nice. No one locks their doors. So it really hit the community hard when something bad happened, eh? No, that's Milwaukee. They lock their fucking doors. How'd that kid get in there?
That is the question after I was done nervously crying the first time I saw this movie, I like the next day I'm sitting there going, how'd you get in the house?
Yeah.
It's like hell, even in some of the surrounding areas outside of Milwaukee, people are still closing their doors. This is not they're locking their doors.
No.
And this is actually a joke that Shaun of the Dead would point out and make fun of, is that they're constantly leaving the front door open. And it's like, yep, happens again here. So it's like that I can look back now and laugh at this rather than, cry myself to sleep and need to take a sleep aid. But the part of this that I wanted to mention, Joe, was we live in Wisconsin. So we have some Wisconsin perspectives here. Where the fuck is Quick Trip?
Not there. Just not there. And this is when Quick Trip is on the rise, by the way, because Quick Trip definitely around in that time, definitely not at the level of amazing that it is right now, but this is when the Glazers really hit the market.
Oof.
And like, people wouldn't believe me at that age when I was like, why are you bothering with Krispy Kreme? We have Glazers right here. You don't have to worry about those. Because, and I will fight you on this, just as good, if not better, than the KK.
I'm happy you didn't say a third K.
I did not go a third K. I stopped very purposefully.
I will say this: the absence of Quick Trip, I think, was just an oversight because there's certain things about the neighborhood that scream, "This is not Wisconsin."
No,
which like there's all these like prefab homes. There's all these like manicured lawns, and it's just rows upon rows of these homes. And it's like, no. If this was Wisconsin, for one, half of this neighborhood is going to be split level because that's just how Wisconsin is.
That's what we do.
There's split level houses everywhere. There's always going to be that like every 3 houses, there's going to be someone who built a shed, and there's going to be a random shed just sitting out. So I was like, okay, all right, I'm taken out of this just a little bit, but I'm still happy that it's Wisconsin.
Yeah,
so
you're telling me there's not one person's neighborhood with more cars that are dead in their yard than are running in their driveway? No, not fully buying it.
Yeah, where are the fire pits? Literally, like every neighborhood has a fire pit, man, and some have them in the front. Like that's just how it goes.
And is it so much asked to just throw a cow in randomly? Like, we know they're not everywhere, but we like them a lot.
But there's a random field on the side of every subdivision, and there's cows. And when you walk by them, they look at you. Like that's just how this goes. They would be looking at the pandemonium, but that's the thing that this movie absolutely nails is the transition from normal life to just complete shit show.
Yes.
And fuck, dude, like just the act of her trying to get out of her house. I mean, I have like the tension build, and I'll agree with you somewhat to this show. The amount of tension that is created in that 10-minute window, like whether it's her trying to get out of her house or her trying to just move out of the neighborhood, that entire sequence is just. I felt like I was right in the middle of it. I mean, what did you think? Like just sitting in that seat.
Oh yeah, like it built suspense perfectly. It is a little guilty of something that, I mean, a lot of zombie movies are, and it's kind of like, I always like give this a slide, right? Where like you will have someone gets bit by a zombie and they are like a zombie in the next 5 minutes. Meanwhile, someone else gets bit by a zombie and they hide it for 4 episodes or like 30 minutes in a movie, and they finally turn. And it's just like, what determines this? Like, they both got bit equally as much. Why are we turning at different rates here? It doesn't make any sense. And I mean, it's because they need to drive the story forward a little bit. We can't. Thankfully, they never fully try and flesh out a science to it. It's just like, no, they get bit and they turn whenever, and that's really all there is to it. So when you see the husband basically die very quickly, and then boom, just go straight into the abhorrent zombie. Actually, you know what? I think I just answered my own question, because they have to die before they become the zombie, not necessarily just a quick turn thing. But yeah, they die and they become the zombie. Mm-hmm.
If I've got to put some credits into the believability factor here, for one, he lost a lot of blood. Like, she rips out a major artery, he's bleeding out, right? There's stuff gushing everywhere. It's like the worst, tampon commercial ever. And then, but before that point, though, he's also kind of, he's lounging. I think he's kind of tired. And then they have coitus. And frankly, he might just be really tired too. He's fatigued. I mean, I know how I am after a performance. Maybe that's a little bit of a joke. Maybe he lost the blood. His body's just ready to break down a little bit, and here we go. It's pushing us. Yeah. But I got to say, when it comes to this movie, it's not a film that's like you're waiting to see a blockbuster star, or you're not going to see like some of the craziest movie trailer topping names or anything. But when Sarah Polley's character leaves her home and everything, she runs into Ving Rhames, who
a staple of the era.
God, he is. I just feel like he's so well positioned as as this cop that he plays, and just this level of seriousness. But I feel like he's using the seriousness as a way to mask his own fear. Because his brother is obviously on the other side of the state. He's trying to get to him. He's finding out little by little, because just like any good zombie movie, you've got these little pockets of people who are finding each other, right? And that kind of happens here, as well as the additional survivors that we end up running to, which just happens to include Mekhi Phifer from 8 Mile fame.
I was gonna say, that's how we know this is a movie and not real life, because he is there, and it is in fact a movie.
Yes. He's not covered in spaghetti, so clearly he didn't just do a performance. But him and Jake Weber, by the way, Jake Weber, I actually really love the way he plays his character as well. He's this somewhat pained guy who knows he's made a lot of mistakes in life, whether it was his marriage or just how he went through the steps of life. And so getting them all together at once, I love how this is almost like in those video games where you have like units of characters that you try to fit together, and they don't belong to the same factions, and so it just doesn't gel at all right away. And the level of like mistrust and all of that stuff at first, I really thought that was great, because we've been feeling uneasy for like the whole first 20 minutes of this movie, right? So,
completely. And love it. There's a particular scene with Jake Weber where I don't know if this was written or ad-libbed, and kudos to everyone in the scene here, where they're talking, they want to go around and figure out what's the worst job we've all ever had. And Jake Weber says, a husband. And one of the women there is like, oh, maybe you just haven't found the right woman yet. And he's like, well, I tried 3 times, got a pink slip every time. And like all the women are kind of like, oh, he's really, maybe he's onto something here. He's really nice. There's no way he's a bad guy like that. And then like, okay, what was the best job you ever had? And he's like, being a dad. And I felt like right there was some sort of weird internal like thing that just flipped in all the women that just the beginning like, oh, Mr. Weber. Like that was just, that felt like that was the mood that happened. Like that, sir, is a damn good line. Well done. Well done. Not one that I'm going to use because, well, one, not in the market, but two, also can't use it. Don't have a kid. Never had a kid. Not going to have a kid. That's the plan. But anyway, just that with these believability things, and one thing that some of you may find, frankly, unbelievable is the performance of one Ty Burrell in this movie. Because if you are a Modern Family person who has never seen this movie and know him pretty much strictly as Jack Dumphy, who is just super nice, super supportive, very positive, you get the bizarro antithesis of that character in this movie.
This was one of the first times I saw him, because I had seen him in some supporting roles, and he never really played like the Modern Family goofy guy that a lot of us know him for. But I had seen him before, and for me, I always thought this guy's perfect at playing an asshole.
Yeah,
It's like but he would never really encapsulate that kind of character again. Like you see so many people that get typecast into roles where they always have to play the serious guy or the drifter, or or like a Jim Carrey who's just constantly the zany person. Yep. And for Ty Burrell to be able to pull this off and then never really go back to that well.
Nope, not doing it.
Yeah, it was just kind of bizarre. When he gets introduced, though, he also gets introduced in the same scene with Matt Frewer. If you remember Matt Frewer from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, he's the neighbor's dad. As soon as I saw him, I was like, oh man, nostalgia hit. But you're also dying. Ah, damn.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Like where have you been? Not a kids movie. Not a kids movie. Weird that someone has to say that, like, in a sentence, but yeah, not a kids movie. And one thing before we continue on with the story and what to do in the event of a zombie apocalypse, this is kind of a fun little movie of, like, I don't want to say cameos, because they're not cameos, they're roles in the movie. Where you get like the guy who played Sex Machine in Dusk Till Dawn is the sheriff in this movie, and he is very much the cocky ass, like, he fucking like, hey man, shoot that guy over there, he's twitching, you can't keep him alive, like he's just, again, worked a long shift, and god damn it, he just wants to go home. He's just fed up with stuff. And so you will just see more and more people like, hey, I've seen him, I know where he's from, throughout this movie. Well, but this is actually part of the movie that I think did really well from the perspective of calling back to the original one. Because when you talk about the original Dawn of the Dead, and when you talk about other movies that are trying to pay homage to those that came before them, these guys were all involved in the original. So it's gonna actually piss me off, because I shouldn't have forgotten his name. No, Tom Savini. Tom Savini is who you're referring to. So he was actually heavily involved in the makeup of the original, and his skills actually took him into more zombie films after this point. So there was Tom Savini, there was Scott Reiniger, and then Ken Foree, who was also in the original. So Ken Foree, you might remember, is the televangelist who they're watching, and he goes, "When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." And then, like, the TV cuts out. So this was them actually pulling original characters from the first one and then integrating them into this one. And so, like, to your point, Joe, when you do have cameos like this and you're paying homage to another film, this was like one of the best examples I've ever seen of using an actor in a callback, because every scene that these guys are involved in was like, holy shit, these are like amazing standalone moments written for these people, and you don't always get that in a soft reboot, or we're not going to talk about Ghostbusters 2016.
No, we can never be over that movie, Mark. I just feel like it's like, some people listening to the podcast, like, guys, let it go. And to you, I say, fuck you, man. Like, have you watched that movie? Have you actually watched that movie and, like, been like, so was there actually a script? Did they actually have an idea, or did they just say, hey, here's the general idea, just go for it? But hey, digress. You know what? I'm actually going to move on from this because if you ever find yourself in a zombie apocalypse, I gotta say, now's a good time to start preparing. Because across America, there are actually buildings probably opening up left and right for you to just take control of, maybe purchase, and set aside as a little nest egg for when this goes down. Because the rest of this movie, the bulk of this movie, is going to take place in one specific location. And that is in a mysterious place called a mall. I feel like people don't really know what this is.
I feel like we should go to the mall today.
I mean, that's exactly what I think when things went down, our cast was thinking. Like, hey, what should we do?
Let's go to the mall, everybody! Go!
Today.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, really, when you look at it, was brilliant. You've got shatterproof glass because malls needed those at the height of their time, which I'd like to say in the early 2000s was probably, I don't want to say peak mall, but still within like really high mall action because online ordering wasn't quite a thing yet. So it's very well like secure. If this just happened, there's lots of food left in the food court that you can grab and use to your advantage, and the amenities. There's shit everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and it's also a callback to, once again, the original. George A. Romero, when he was trying to think of a site for a place to shoot a film, he had a connection with a friend who I believe was in Pennsylvania. He just happened to be the operator of this mall that was, he's looking around and he goes, I really think we can make something of this. And so it was cool to keep that idea because it does work really well. Like, yes, it's familiar. Yes, it's a shopping mall. A lot of us feel safe going to shopping malls, despite, some of the things that would happen in the years preceding. Yeah. But it is like, it does, like when we're talking about zombie prep, like I feel like everybody at some point in their life has sat there and went through their zombie plan and what they would do and how they would do all this stuff. And so it's like you're getting to see that plan in action and how these folks want to go through it. One call out I do want to make about it though was how the mall cops that were living there, that were holding up there before everybody else gets there, they still felt like stereotypical asshole cops to me, which was so interesting. Like it's the early 2000s. We haven't really gotten into some of these societal things yet where we're really exploring this as a topic, and yet we've got it here. Like, that's why I was curious when we were looking at some of the commentary, and they're saying we're not really commenting on any of the things the original did. It's like, yeah, we kind of are here.
Yeah,
like
we are.
Yeah, just a smidge. So yeah, I don't really get where that commentary comes from. I just don't.
I think again, like, it's one of those things where I don't know if the original is necessarily as good as some people who really think it is. Because yes, it does make some good social commentary. Acting is good from like two people in the original. So it's just like, yeah, it was a movie. And maybe like, again, I think part of what makes every movie great is also like the time that it came out in and what was comparatively around it. And obviously by the time like we hit 2004, zombie movies are pretty stale by that time. So this has an uphill battle basically going into the box office. Whereas like the original Dawn of the Dead, not a whole lot of zombie before that. So like, hey, it's new, it's original, it's also got some smart things. It's not just another horror flick, because at that time, like, horror is definitely on the decline. After like the Universal monsters are not really doing much anymore. Yeah.
But even the original Dawn of the Dead though faced a ton of controversy because of how violent it was and because of how realistic at the time the effects felt to people. So it ended up being like an X-rated film that they weren't even sure how to market back then. And when you put this against the 2004 expectations of going to a horror film, this is why I believe it hit so hard, was that we were used to seeing campy horror. We were used to seeing horror films where you might get, one decent film out of every like 5 that you would go check out. And then suddenly, like, everyone's terrified watching this movie.
Well, yeah, but hey, Mark, I mean, you're bringing up like this whole like the original movie, like even for its time, was realistic and gory and super violent.
I said, well, hold on. Let me ask you this: were they at least entertaining the children?
Now that you say that, Joe, when I saw this, there was like 4 rows of 8-year-olds sitting in front of me. Yeah, it's
just having a great time.
Plain as day, remembering it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But something I do remember, Joe, which is one of the first times I've ever seen this in a film, let alone, in a zombie movie. The concept of a zombie baby.
Ooh. Yeah. How we like. So again, this is one of those things with this movie where like it felt like a reach, just because like okay, you need a quick scare. What can we do? Zombie baby. Like it makes sense, but at the same time, it's like like how it happened. I get that the baby's a zombie, but did we have to do it? Probably not.
Okay, so I will let you have that thought without challenging it, because I'm not saying I fully agree, but I'm not saying I disagree completely either. Like, I think for me, what that zombie baby really represents, because we're not going to tell you how we get there, we're just going to let you know that it is there. Yeah. But for me, it represented this concept of the mall feeling like a sense of security at first.
Yeah.
And then slowly realizing that, this is not a place we can stay forever.
No.
And I mean, and that's as new faces show up, at the mall, and then as Mekhi Phifer and his wife kind of seclude themselves a little bit, there's just that sense of uneasiness that we get in pieces throughout the movie, and this is really where it like hits that point where you're like, oh man, I felt like I had some footing here. I absolutely do not anymore.
No, that's kind of like the theme to most zombie franchises is what you find out. And I know, God, what is it? Z Nation? What's the?
The sci-fi one.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking different. No, it's the wrong one. It's the one with Brad Pitt. It's a movie.
World War Z.
Yeah, World War Z. That's what it was. Z Nation's the sci-fi one. But like, he basically, the theme throughout the movie is that you can't stay put. Like, you can't get comfortable. You've got to keep moving to survive these situations. And that's basically what happens in every zombie franchise. Look at The Walking Dead. They every season kind of culminates to like, hey, we think we finally found a safe place to stay. And then early the season afterwards, fuck, it looks like we got to leave again. We got to keep going because something happened and the zombies got in. It's just kind of what keeps happening is that you've got to keep moving because there is no one safe space to be. So that's kind of where shit goes down in the movie. We lose some characters again because that's what's going to happen. I'm not telling you who goes down. Granted, we've only really talked about, 3 people who are characters in this movie, and a group of mall cops who, one, in an alternate universe, would go off to have a pretty good job working for the President of the United States.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
That was a point in time, by the way, where a lot of people didn't know Michael Kelly either. So Michael Kelly, as you mentioned, he would go on to be on House of Cards and a whole bunch of other like just really, really solid like thrillers and TV programs. But yeah, this was the first time I was introduced to Michael Kelly. I thought he played his role incredibly well here. But to your point, Joe, yeah, we only talked about a couple of the characters in the movie, and not all of them are like well-known people either, right? These are people that probably, if I read off their names, I guarantee you folks wouldn't know who they are, but they do the things that they are supposed to do in this movie well. The acting, which in a lot of these zombie movies, sometimes the suspect takes you out of it. And this is one of the few where I feel like the performances of the people involved, that didn't happen. I felt like they had a really good grasp on a very solid story from that perspective.
Yeah, and while there is so much of this movie, I think because we're getting close to the end of the podcast for this week. Before we do like the lasting legacy of this movie, high point, low point of this movie, Mark. What do you got? Like, what's where like you've kind of felt the best, and then like this was either, and low point can either be like, hey, this is when shit hits the fan and things just feel like it's bad, or it's like, oh, hey, you know what? Even for this kind of movie, it was a bit of a reach. What are you thinking?
So for me, the high point was when the box truck shows up, because there in other movies, or even in this one, they talk about how the zombies are starting to show up at the mall because there's a part of their brain that still tells them this is a place you used to go, and so the zombies just kind of congregate there. But when the box truck shows up and you've got this new group of survivors that weren't the original ones that we're introduced to, when they show up, you truly get to see what you're up against. Because before that point, yeah, we saw how terrifying the zombies could be. We didn't see them running at a full sprint towards people.
No, yeah, holy shit.
Yeah, for me, that was a high point because it was so scary to see that presentation. And once again, this level of just full on fear and stress and what they could inject into the film. That part was just, to me, like once again, Joe, take myself back to the theater watching this. I was like slinking down going like, that dude doesn't have an arm, but he's got like Usain Bolt speed right now, and that's scaring the shit out of me. So for me, that was a high point. What about you?
I think high point for me is definitely something that I'm kind of a sucker for. This when it happens in movies, when you've got a lot of like rising action happening and you've got these like larger than life events that are occurring, but there will be a few minutes in a movie where the characters just sort of slow down, and in these unbelievable times they find ways to just kind of be human and make their days work for them despite everything that's going on around them. So like part of this is, like I said, that montage of like we get to really know the characters while Richard Cheese is playing in the background, and you just see them kind of doing their own things or doing some rather sexy things in the mall with each other or by themselves. But then also when it's all said and done, and you've got like them sitting on the roof and they're talking to Andy, who owns a gun store, like kitty corner on the block away, and you've got like them saying, "Hey," they're picking zombies for Andy to like pick off, and there's like one that looks like Jay Leno and Burt Reynolds and Rosie O'Donnell, and it's just sort of like this. Yeah, they're finding ways to have fun in like the creepiest and craziest of times, and that may be one of the most human things that we ever do, is we normalize and kind of move on.
I totally agree with you, because it's a very human moment where everything else around you isn't, and so like, yeah, you found like a little piece of humanity at a time where it feels like you could never get it back, and so I totally agree with you there. However, with that sequence of Andy, the guy on the other side, who frankly is like really easy to like, you don't get to hear him a whole lot. There is a low point for me with this, because in a movie that did a lot of good things, I really felt like Andy could have been one of those moments where you could still create the same sense of dread you did the entire movie, but not the way that they ended up doing it, because they're trying to send food over to him. Some things go sideways. What I really thought they could have done better, if we're tweaking a scene here, was when you find out that Andy, when they're trying to send food over to him, when things don't go well, I felt like that would have gone better if they didn't involve any other characters with him, and instead you just get to hear like more zombies coming in after him. And you just hear it through the radio, and then you just kind of hear that. Like that effect, I think, could have been heartbreaking because the characters are obviously love this guy. They can't get to him, but they're trying to use. They're almost using each other to stay in it, to stay in the moment, to be like, hey, we'll see you tomorrow. We're writing on our little whiteboards and we're keeping our our morale going. For a zombie movie to really have that resonating fear and hopelessness, that was the moment where I thought you could have really hit home there. And it wasn't awful, by the way. Yeah, no, wasn't awful how they did it, but I think that's where they really could have ramped that up.
Yeah. Yep. I know. For me, the low point happens relatively quick in this movie, where I think the worst thing you get is literally right after our main character makes it out of her house because she was attacked by a neighbor child and her husband. And she's now getting into her car, and another neighbor is now in the middle of the road while she's in her driveway. And while she doesn't move, she says, "Neighbor, what the hell's going on?" And he, who has a gun and is in his bathrobe, just decides to point the gun at her and say, "Get back." And she's like, I just want to know what's going on. I'm not doing anything. What's going on? And he's like, "I said get back." And she hasn't moved, Mark. She is literally, like, basically, she's like the top of her driveway. He's in the middle of the road. And it's like, I get, like, shit's going crazy, but, like, you couldn't have thought even better dialogue for this guy? Get back? How about even stay there? Leave me alone. Are you bit? Like, answer me. Like, have you been bit? Like, something to bring up the fear. Instead, we just get this moron who feels threatened by someone, like, a third of his size who's 50 feet away from him. It's like, this guy's an idiot. This is dumb. Like, then he quickly gets hit by an ambulance and the world goes on. But yeah, in a relatively, like, again, like, I think a pretty good zombie movie, you get the worst part of it out of the way pretty quick.
Put yourself in his shoes, though, man. This guy is trying to cope with the fact that cheese curds may never come back.
Oh,
he may be without.
Otherwise.
I was gonna say he may be without spotted cow beer for the rest of his life. He's not even sure what the hell's going on. But yes, I do remember that distinctly, where it's like, "Get back," and it's like, if you had 3 fingers working on one hand, you could push her away. Like,
you could.
I don't.
Yeah. It's seriously, it's like in Super Troopers when, like, they're fucking with the high kids and, like, telling them to pull over. Like, "We're already pulled over, man. He can't pull over any farther." That's what she's doing. She's like, "Where do you want me to go? I'm right." Like, I guess I could walk further away, but, like, there's already, like, you know, a great white shark between the two of us. Like, I'm not sure what you want me. Like, come on, pal. But anyway. Dumb moment aside, I think we have to look at what this film has left us with to this day and why we still want to talk about it. So, Mark, what do you think is this movie's lasting legacy?
For me, I think it's an example of when people think about how a reboot should be done. This was like the shining example, because while I did have some knowledge of the original film, that did not in any way sour this experience for me. And the sense of dread that's, like, consistent throughout, the music. I mean, good Lord, it starts off with Johnny Cash, and, like, when we talk about movies that, like, really set the perfect tone, this was one of those intros where, like, sorry, I'm, like, getting nostalgic here again, but, like, you've got, like, these scenes of, like, the world responding to major events, and they place you into that pandemonium without zombies really being the focus yet. And so as it kind of goes through that in the beginning, and then you start to go into this, once again, this water about to boil over. That was really hard for me the first time I watched it. It was really hard to sit there in the movie theater and, like, not be terrified. Like, this is the movie that galvanized me for future zombie movies.
Yeah.
It really did.
It's part, like you said, that juxtaposition over, like, you just had something crazy, traumatic, and just fast-paced happen, and then suddenly things hit, like, a slowdown, and you start getting, like, these newsreels popping up, and like when it comes, like obviously it's Johnny Cash, like you said, playing. It's when the man comes around. Not a very fast paced song. It's actually supposed to be a relatively like if you like Johnny Cash, it's a pretty good song. It's talking about like well, I was going to say
Horsemen.
Like, perdition. Yeah, the Four Horsemen. It's the end
Four
of the
Horsemen.
world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's the end of the world, but it's delivered in this oddly upbeat fashion that is not intense, but is somehow haunting because of it. And it just really is the perfect song to use when you see the shit going down. And that is where we would like to thank you for continuing listening to Digital Dissection, because everything that our dissection crew does for us week in and week out really, really helps out the podcast. And just in case that you happen to have found today's episode by accident, if you could go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, and maybe even write a review wherever you're listening to us, it would go a long way.
And of course, we always love hearing from you, so feel free to message us over at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. We're actually not just doing podcasts anymore, folks. We're doing a lot more with video, and there's a ton of content for you to actually check out when we're not doing the podcast. So if you have any ideas for things you would like to see, stuff that we're going to be working on in the future that you want to contribute to even, just let us know. We'd love to discuss it with you. So just make sure, though, that's still tastefully done. And until next time, keep on dissecting.
Hey, Mark, what was on that sandwich?